Good morning all, this is another video from High Speed Tracks, and this one's going to be about how I set about creating cuttings. This is potentially quite tricky in Train Simulator because of the size of the individual blocks of terrain that you can move about. You'll have probably seen in a number of railworks scenery you'll get these odd little triangular patterns here instead of nice smooth sides. Very common stuff. You lay the track through a piece of terrain under the ground because the tracks aren't running in a cutting at the time, and you use the anchor tool, the magnet tool rather, to get the terrain to go down to track level, and you end up with these rather jaggedy, stickety curved things. So there are cutting lofts that you can get to create a smooth side here, but in terms of laying on vegetation and so on afterwards, that can be a bit tricky, and the best thing to do, if you possibly can, is to find a way of making a nice smooth cutting edge. And I had to do one anyway, and this is at Rue, just outside of Stoke Cannon on the Bristol to Exeter line. That's the bit we're currently working on. So I thought I'd just do a quick video to show you how I do it. So here we are. If you know Rue, this is the bridge over the main line right in the middle of the town. There's no buildings or anything here yet. There's a bit of road, that's all. I've painted the fields already because I quite like getting that done. Bit of a variety and things, so that's the fields all around, but there's really not much done yet, and it's actually quite important, if you possibly can, to get all of these cuttings and embankments sorted before you start adding much in the way of scenery. It's much easier to create cuttings and embankments and so on without the other bits of scenery there getting in the way and making it difficult to do. So we'll get into Editor, Control E, so that we can begin to make some adjustments. The key to my approach is actually, oddly enough, to use an embankment in order to allow really good smooth siding cuttings, and I'll show you why in a minute. But the first thing I'm going to do is to add a length of embankment throughout the entire length of the cutting area. You can see that I've actually got an embankment in the middle there. It carries on into the early part of the cutting but doesn't carry on after that. So the first thing I'm going to do is put, using the offset tool, I'm going to put a cutting underneath the track in the area I want to get nice and smooth. So you can see the cutting ends around about there where there's actually already an embankment off. So then create your offset, and I just happen to know that I want the offset to be 2 meters, and then right at this point here go for the cutting of your choice. Now the cutting I use in High Speed Tracks Railways of Devon and Cornwall comes with one of the routes that we've got as a compulsory. To be honest, I can't quite remember which it is. I think it's probably the East Somerset, but anyway, it's the Greengrass Gravel 2-track, well, because it's 2-track embankment. Click there and that will put it into place. And there's only one ribbon of it goes all the way through in the area that we've selected. Do you see that? Sometimes, and I don't know why this happens, and there as well, it creates these odd little things, and you can fix that by getting the cutting tool there. And the same here. This might be a bit more tricky because it's a bit complicated, but anyway, the cutting tool I'm just going to get rid of this, I think. There. I'll replace that bit later on. Anyway, if we go underground, you can see that we've got an embankment. And the reason I want the embankment there is this. So if I now use the terrain elevating and de-elevating tools, you can see that's the edge. And actually this creates it's just about the right width for the track all the way along. If you were going to have, for example, a cable, a concrete cable channel thing, the concrete would go around about there. This is just about the right kind of width for the formation, and it tells me where I want the cutting to begin and end. So let's start manipulating the cutting. I'll kind of talk about it as I do it to explain what I'm up to. I mean, clearly this is too far away from where we want it to start. Oh, that's too much, so we'll undo that, turn that down. You want it on number 10, which is around about, it enables you to grab the corners of these square shapes that you can manipulate. So that gets me nicely there. But clearly this is now going onto the track, which is a bit of a problem, but we'll return to this in a bit. And again with this, we want that to be nicely smooth, and again here, and here, and here. So round about the right kind of gradient up the side there. And then we want to start losing these jaggedy edges is here. That's it. You can see up the top then we're beginning to achieve the kind of smoothness that's needed in a really good cutting. Do the same the other side. That's even further away from the track. Don't worry about this bit yet, we'll sort that later on. A bit under the road. And that can come up as well. Just elevating these sections as we need them. There's a fair bit of fiddling to do later on, but I'll talk you through that. And here again we want that jaggedy edge to come down a bit. So in terms of the top of the embankment, we're beginning to achieve the smoothness that we want, even if we don't have it at the bottom of the embankment. So what do we do about the bottom of the embankment? Well, this is what I do. Because you've got that embankment cutting, you can get the smoothness you want by going right down deeply under the surface of the earth, with your surface being preserved, an image or a pretense of the surface being preserved by the bottom of the embankment. This is not all a win-win, sadly. If, like me, you're a fan of Vulcan's fantastic grass, it does mean that what you can't do is put grass on the top of the track formation in this section here. If you want any at all, it has to be 3D assets. But anyway, I'm prepared to do that because I like the quality of this arrangement as opposed to jagged edges. So back to this, you're smoothing your edges, and I think right now we're beginning to get the effect which I think you'll recognise as a smoothly sided cutting. Let's look up that way, and there you have it. And you just have to fiddle with these, going up and down to get things where you want them to be. I mean, clearly this is going to have to be painted a different colour. There is a lovely embankment terrain paint I use for embankments for obvious reasons. And you don't need a trackbed paint because the trackbed comes pre-painted by the top of the embankment loft. So going to the paint palette and choosing embankment, you can then paint things as you need them. It helps to do this anyway so that you can see where the edge of the track is and the edge of the cut. There. Okay, now this is the sort of thing that happens and you've got to try to deal with. Sometimes you can't, but you just have to fiddle up and down and try and get it as close as you can to what you need. So let's compare. That's how it started off, jagged edges, wide, and this is how we finish up. Oh, need to do a little bit of painting there to get rid of that. It'll never be perfect because at the end of the day it's a simulation, isn't it? A lot of people don't remember that, but you just do your best and you fiddle. That one there, you have to try and imagine where that end of the, there it is, that's it. End of the tail and bring that up again. And you just basically keep fiddling like that. Oh, there you see, this is where you can't get it right both sides. It's too high up, so we just have to go down and just live with that because you can't have it both ways. So there you are. And I'm not going to pretend that this doesn't take a long time. It does take a long time, but getting things right just does sometimes. There is your nice smooth cutting. I mean, I guess what you would do now is to start to think about some vegetation. The vegetations I like at the moment anyway come from the Train Sim Academy, which has a really nice embankment. There it is, an embankment large, which then fits beautifully into this area. Now the thing is, we haven't got that right yet, so I'll just do this as a medium rather than a large. But if you had, say, so anyway, oh, that's large again. Get rid of that. A medium, which you can then get over there, and then use this tool. I, by the way, prefer the old-fashioned Train Sim 14 gimbal, I call it, rather than that one. So I like the Train Sim 14, and then you just have to play with it until it's just right. Turn off the magnet so it doesn't float with the ground. Check it from the side view. Standing a bit proud, isn't it, really? This is the view you'd see from the train. That would then comprise most of the side of the cutting. The bit down next to the grass, to the track rather, tends to be a bit grassy. For reasons I've already explained, it's a bit tricky using Vulcan's grass when you've got things going underground. The grass I tend to use comes from the Riviera line for Rowers of Devon and Cornwall. It's based on the Riviera line, so grass weeds line number 1. And similarly, you put it into your place there. Rotate it a bit so that it begins to go up the side, and check the impact of your work as seen from a train. So it'd be about there, wouldn't it? And you would copy that all the way along the bit that you had done. In this particular bit of cutting, I happen to know that there's quite a lot of other foliage and bushes and trees and things. So another bush, a nice really nice flexible bush asset. Bush is a FlexiGroup 7, which I just happen to know is the one that I want, so I'll go with it there. And this is beginning, as you see, to achieve the effect that we want. You can do the FlexiGroup thing in like an X shape, so you don't have a sort of just a string of in a line, achieving what I think is beginning to look like quite a nice realistic embankment side. So there you go. I hope that helps you in creating a nice smooth embankment side, and that you've done a bit of learning. Thank you very much.